Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Like an installation of an idea, of a belief. That was a belief, the belief in pathology that was installed into me. And because it was delivered to me by a professional, like a doctor, which in our social hierarchy, our social conditioning, we just naturally believe, well, a doctor must know. They're a doctor. So, of course, I've got this thing called substance use disorder, And so I'd never questioned those things. I had a whole list of them. And I realized that I'd spent my whole life believing these beliefs that people had given to me about myself. I had subscribed to them too. They were given to me. I never questioned it. And then I continued the narrative in my own mind of being this flawed, damaged individual with all these diagnoses. So, and I had the realization that it's not true. This is not true. This is not who I am. These are not, they're nothing. They're someone's opinion. And I've spent my whole life feeling like I'm not okay because of this narrative that I've been given along the way of my struggle. Yeah, I've always been okay. I'm still here now, aren't I? I've always managed. I've always coped. I've always got through things. But 99% of that experience inside myself, I've been feeling like I'm not okay. But when I look back, I actually was quite resilient. I got through so much struggle.
Introducing a powerful new update from the Foojan app. Now with flexible subscription plans to fit your journey monthly, quarterly, or yearly. Our new AI-driven onboarding customizes your path to feeling better, faster, and enjoy a refreshed experience with stunning 3D interactive videos. Update now. Empower your inner voice with Foojan. Download today.
Welcome to the Inner Voice, a Heartfelt Chat podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zeine. I'm a psychotherapist, author, and the founder of the International Awareness Integration Institute. Today, I will be talking with Jason Shiers. He is the founder of the Infinite Recovery Project. It's a pioneering approach to addiction recovery that breaks away from the traditional pathologizing models and drawing from his own lived experience of addiction, trauma, and transformation. Jason combines deep personal insight with professional training as a certified psychotherapist. His work challenges outdated ideas of addiction and recovery, offering a human, hopeful pathway for individuals and organizations seeking lasting change. Through the Infinite Recovery Project, Jason helps people not just overcome addiction, but rediscover their innate capacity for freedom, connection, and wholeness. We're going to be talking about his latest book, The Infinite Recovery, which sounds more like Infinite Discovery. It's a beautiful and a compassionate way of looking at ourselves as being a human being and being an amazing person as who we are and discovering who we really are. And by shedding, as we discover all of the other sides, non-shame based. So we talked about how this process kind of unfolds. And I hope that you enjoy the discussion and learn as much as I did. Now, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on my YouTube channel and connect with me through my website, foojanzeine.com, or any other social media platforms. Remember that we have our virtual clinic at the International Awareness Integration Institute, which we offer psychotherapy, coaching, a lot of the mind and body, somatic work, and functional medicine for online for anyone around the world who can utilize this. And our therapists and coaches are trained in the awareness integration theory, which is not only a trauma-informed, but also a cognitive, emotional, somatic, evidence-based model, which could support you really create a fulfilled life. You can contact me at foojanzeine.com, and you can check out our clinic at awarenessintegration.com. I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me through any of my social media. And without further ado, here's Jason Shiers.
Listen up if you want to promote your personal growth and self-awareness. I found the Foojan app last month and I have been absolutely loving it. I personally have never learned guided meditation, but thanks to this app, I now have learned incredible tools for my own stress relief and emotional self-awareness. Not to mention, there are self-evaluation tools and professional coaching available to utilize however your journey to self-discovery takes you. Join Foojan today and redefine your life one step at a time.
Intentional Parenting, a practical guide to awareness integration theory, written by Dr. Jafari, Dr. Foojan Zeine, and Dr. Manoukian, three experts in human development, is your step-by-step guide to raising a healthy child prepared for a culturally integrated world. You're supported in parenting infants to adolescents using the latest evidence-based scientific research on parenting. Order your copy on Amazon now.
So nice to have you back on my show. Jason Shiers, everyone. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Nice to be here.
So you have written a new book, Infinite Recovery, and you're looking at it from another angle. You're looking at recovery from addiction from a whole different conversation. And I'd love for us to be able to talk about that because in some sense, yes, it's not working in creating solution for many people who have this condition. So can you share, first of all, what your beliefs are that are different in the world of recovery?
Yeah, I mean, beliefs and anecdotal data, I'm going to say, because many years of practicing this way, okay, it doesn't equate to evidence-based practice, but actually evidence-based practice is not that, the evidence is not that compelling if you really look at what evidence-based is. So anecdotal data and years of practice and transformation and personal change, brought me to this place. Everything is a belief until it's not, until it's a transformational experience. So what I found on my own journey, what I learned about myself, but certainly before I practiced it on anyone else, was that I'd spent my whole life feeling like I was not okay. Like I had XYZ disorder, personality disorder, diagnosis, addiction, borderline personality disorder, I had psychiatric diagnosis, more than 15 in total over, teenage years where I was in a chaotic state. So there was an installation, like an installation of an idea, of a belief, that was the belief in pathology that was installed into me. And because it was delivered to me by a professional, like a doctor, which in our social hierarchy, our social conditioning, we just naturally believe, well, a doctor must know. They're a doctor. So, of course, I've got this thing called substance use disorder, and so I'd never questioned those things. I had a whole list of them. And I realized that I'd spent my whole life believing these beliefs that people had given to me about myself. I had subscribed to them too. They were given to me. I never questioned it. And then I continued the narrative in my own mind of being this flawed, damaged individual with all these diagnoses. So, and I had the realization that it's not true. This is not true. This is not who I am. These are not, they're nothing. They're someone's opinion. And I've spent my whole life feeling like I'm not okay because of this narrative that I've been given along the way of my struggle. Yeah, I've always been okay. I'm still here now, aren't I? I've always managed. I've always coped. I've always got through things. But 99% of that experience inside myself, I've been feeling like I'm not okay. But when I look back, I actually was quite resilient. I got through so much struggle. So then I just started questioning, like, what is happening then? Like what was really going on? And from there, I just got very curious and investigated through all sorts of different modalities of change, through spiritual awakening, through trauma work. And my life started to make more sense from a point of view that in childhood, I lost my father. He was killed. He went out the door and he didn't come back. And that was it, And having a now 8-year-old, nearly 9 myself now, it makes so much more sense over the last few years, how tender, how sensitive he is, how beautiful he is, but that was just, and how playful and fun he is, and that was just taken away from me, and I thought, imagine what that would do to him, like when you've got a real life little boy in front of you. And before that, before having him, I knew what happened, and I knew life had got serious all of a sudden. And I knew my playfulness and my fun and my curiosity about life had been stolen, had gone, in that experiences that had happened. But in this putting all this together, I thought, doesn't it make sense that I escaped myself? Doesn't it make sense that like life got serious all of a sudden? Doesn't it make so much sense that I was given all these diagnoses? Because what else could people do? Like they didn't know any different. And I was presenting with these behaviors, because I was escaping myself, it was like, because life was, being me was a lot, was too much. So all that led me to that realization to start going, well, if it makes sense, like if these behaviors make sense to me, then they're intelligent, like of course, the internal dis-ease of the nervous system is intense for our inner world. Then reaching for something outside of ourself is smart. That thing outside myself is going to fix this experience inside myself. Then doesn't really matter. I only see that there's one addiction. People talk, classify and multiply addictions by all sorts of types. There's only addiction for me. It doesn't matter what the substance or behavior or process is, because there is just an attempt to regulate a dysregulated system. So, okay, then, so that means everything that's going on is actually intelligent. Then I'm not faulty. I'm not wired up wrong. Actually, my biology is dictating my behavior. And until I learn to integrate these insights and regulate my nervous system and be with myself and realize that I am not that, I'm not that diagnosis, that label, that list, that flawed, damaged person that I thought over time. That was my big realization. And that was really the start of my work and the creation of my book, and like what I was wanting to articulate and put into words and sort of tell the world about, that actually people are not broken, and that's not helpful, because we all resist, I've seen this with so many people, that there's an initial resistance to taking on a diagnosis, like the body rejects it because it's not true. It's just a categorization. But quite often we defer to what we think is someone else's greater wisdom than ours because of our social conditioning. So we reluctantly take on these, I am broken and I will do these things in order to make myself okay. But that can't work, because we're not broken anyway. We were never broken in the first place. And doing things like in order to sustain a set of behaviors is non-sustainable. It can't be long-term solution. So mostly when people are entered into a pathology-based treatment program or model of addiction, what they do is transfer addictions. So they put down drugs and alcohol because it is so destructive and so on, but then they pick up sex, porn, relationships, money, debt, gambling, another form of escapism that's more socially acceptable. And then they declare themselves clean. Oh, I'm doing great now. My life's changed. I'm not using drugs anymore. I forgot to mention that I'm 10 grand in debt. I gained 50 kilos and I've got 3 girlfriends and I'm watching pornography every night. It's like, that's how it looks. And I know this because I was the therapist of therapists when I was in my traditional model of work, a long time ago. And that's what got me quite curious about what's really going on in this whole model. Most of the therapists are in recovery. Most of the people in recovery have still got secret addictions, and they're the ones that are helping new people. So who is really helping who, And when I had all these experiences, when I started my book, I was over 20 years in recovery. I mean, I'm over 30 years now, but I wouldn't say I was in recovery, like now, honestly. Then I would, because I was so attached to this identity of being in recovery and what that meant. But now I would say that really only 10 years have been really free of all addictions, and I do say now there is a cure to addiction. That's what I share, there is a cure to it, it's not incurable. I am cured, I am free, 100% free, and that's the place I get to, and that's what I share about, and that's what I love people to know,
I really like what you're saying. And part of the conversation is having the type of kind of compassion toward the self, and knowing that different parts of you, that yes, you're not broken. This isn't something, that it's a pathology, so that I need to be ashamed and not necessarily deal with what's going on. I think part of the categorization is also that is helpful, because sometimes, when I work, and I consider myself an addict also, I've never used substances in a sense, but like you said, addiction is a frame of mind. So I know that the categorization of when you look at something across the world, across different populations, socioeconomic, gender roles and everything, that it has a particular pattern, then usually, we could call it addiction. And the addiction itself is because wherever you go, this pattern is there, regardless of, like you said, the behavior or the substance that somebody uses. So the categorization of it has been helpful in treatment when I've done the treatment and I've worked with kind of myself. But I do get it that the categorization doesn't necessarily have to be pathologized as if you're broken, and the meaning of you're broken that is on top of it, that it creates a different layers of shame and blame, and putting yourself into a situation versus looking at, like exactly what you said. What is it that I need? What does my brain need? What does my body need? And what are the ways that I can offer whatever it's needed in a way that is workable for me, versus seeking out something, a behavior or some substance that supposedly going to fulfill whatever my need is. However, it has a hell of a lot higher consequences than just fulfilling my need.
I think I can understand what you mean. I know people can get an initial relief from the categorization. Quite often they're not educated properly, like they're given out without being told, look, this is not who you are, this is just a temporary solution to what's going on for you, and so on. That's not delivered that way. It's delivered like, this is what's going on, and so on. So people innocently take on the belief, and you can't gaslight yourself and you can't gaslight others, in this respect. Like, you can't say, hey, you're really okay, you're good, you're healthy and that, but I'm going to give you this label and you're going to have to do these things to be okay. The body knows, the body knows that, well, if I need to do these things to be okay, then there must be something wrong with me. Like i.e. go to meetings or service others or do certain things in order to maintain this behavior that's going on. So I think, in some ways certainly for me, a pathology of taking on the label of addict, certainly changed my life. My recovery started in 12 steps. I can't say it's all bad. And I still even say to clients sometimes, there's nowhere else you can go where there's a group of people, so interested in staying sober. It doesn't exist anything like that.
Yeah. I think what I've noticed as a obstacle that that the categorization has supported in some sense has been, and please share with me, what you hear from me and how it lands on you. Where I've found the obstacle, it has been that someone is using whether it's a behavior or a substance, and they get that there's an impact, a result that it has that is not workable for their life or people around them, right? Because this is not just a unique concept of whatever I do only impacts me. It doesn't. It impacts the whole family system. It impacts the society as big. And then at that moment, because of that need, the level of the need is heightened, the level of impact and the consequences that they experience, and it's the experience of everyone around, is minimized by that. And then everybody concentrates only on that substance or that behavior. And it's, the person is not, in a sense, looking at, what do I need to look at inside of myself that has this need, but it's, it's taking this path to get this need. And I'm not watching and looking at the consequences. I'm just, going after the need. And I think partially the categorization of supports it, whereas it's not, like you said, it's not this substance or this behavior. It's something internal that you really have to start looking at and honoring that need, but let's look at how we could honor it, how we could heal it, and how we could fulfill that need in a whole different way. But sometimes everybody just concentrates on that particular behavior. And sometimes you can't do anything unless that particular behavior has stopped. Like if you're using a mind-altering substance, like you said, you want to be intelligent about it. You can't really utilize all of your intelligence because a substance is hijacking you. So that's where sometimes I think the clash comes between, does educating someone about the addiction process supports them to capture that they are honored, but they have to honor themselves in order to be able to fulfill their needs in a more healthier way. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's never going to be different regardless of the fundamental understanding as a pathology or as intelligence, which I see as two completely opposing understandings. Like the person still needs to want to stop. It's kind of like I can't facilitate their own desire. I can only facilitate the space, the safe space for healing if they want to. And, I do think there's reasons people prefer the pathology model because, like you mentioned, it's almost like, I don't want to use the word excuse, but I sometimes think it's like it lessens the shame. It lessens the blame. It takes them away from stress, from the family and so on. And they start saying, well, this is the reason I did this. I've got a disease and so on. So it takes away all those things. So it's got a benefit, but then there's a limitation as well. Like at some point, you need to go beyond that limitation, and that's where I come in with my work. And actually, I'm not working with people in chronic using patterns. I need people to be able to be conscious and aware and to think clearly, so I'm working with people in recovery more often where they have tried traditional recovery and then they've found that it's not working for them and that they keep transferring addictions and so on, and they're unhappy, they're still longing, they're still wanting to use, they're still struggling, even though they're years clean.
Yes. And I think it's so important to know that there is this part, because I can share from myself, Jason, and I know that there is I do have a different brain than someone that doesn't have, addiction. Like my husband doesn't have addiction, and my brain and the way that I think. And I've been a therapist for 30 years. I've started my work on myself for probably around 40 years. And I can tell you that as I watch my brain lie to me in the instances of need, and is the actually looking at that part of myself and not shaming it, not blaming it, and now, being compassionate and with that part. But even this awareness of where does this start? Does it start with an anxiety and then the anxiety moves forward, and then is it just, is it the craving that shows up? Is it a habit that shows up? And I could tell you all of it, the traumas that I've gone through, which the traumas have created high levels of anxiety, and that anxiety shows up as a trigger. And then immediately my brain starts, seeking for safety somehow and comfort with some sort of, either a thought process or a behavior or a substance. At this point, substance for me is sugar. So the most addictive one, So there is a way that my brain operates, which as I love it and are compassionate with it, then I can work with it. And I'm sensing that's what you're kind of sharing, is when you are able to really go in and look at yourself and look at all of these different parts and then be able to heal yourself. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Well, I think there's multiple parts. I would say what you described is a response to nervous system, what's going on in your nervous system. And there's a somatic part to my work, which is really what we're experiencing is thought process, like the narration of our somatic experience, in the moment. So you looking at the brain activity, what's going on and so on. But what I hear you describing, you might not see it this way, but what I hear you describing is that not that you want to move towards something, it's that you want to move away from something that's already being experienced. And just so happens that this particular substance is the choice. Like I said, the addiction doesn't matter whether it's sugar, substances, food, whatever. It's like, so we're always moving away from something, and that is like an internal experience that we don't want to be with, or even not consciously. It could be subconscious, something happening. We don't feel anything, but we just feel the urge to go and do something that seems like not a good idea. So going towards yourself, is what I call it, going the journey to yourself, going into your inner world, navigating and learning about who you are, like in your internal system, like what happened to you, like why the pain, why the struggle, what's really happening. And sometimes there can be impasses, there can be nonverbal experiences, they can be tensions, contractions, constrictions, so on. There can be lumps in the throat, tight jaws, shoulders, back pain, skin conditions that show up all as early life responses to early life adversity, that still exist in the nervous system. And there's so many of that. There's so much diverse and different experiences that people have had and the ways that they show up, but sitting, questioning, being curious about somatic experience, tension, there's a lump in my tummy, there's a tension in my jaw. What does it want to say? Does it have a voice? How old does it feel? How long has it been there? Is it familiar to you? It's kind of like, oh yeah, it's really familiar. Yeah, it started when I was 8 years old, like just by being curious about your jaw, or yeah, I started doing this when I was this age, and things like that. It's like everything's got a story to it, it's so smart, the mind-body system. And mostly, if you say to people, are we going to go on a journey to inwardly, a journey to yourself? They'll be like, oh, what do you mean? I'm already me. Like, how do you go inwardly? Like, where do you go? Like, what do you do? And it is a kind of abstract experience, going on a journey to yourself. Sometimes you have to make up your own language for it, because all the words that we all use for thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, they all mean something different to all of us. Your feeling or emotional experience that you might describe to me, I might understand as meaning something different inside of me. So I often say to clients, you need to make up the language for this, just tell me what it is, what do you think it is that's going on? And I try not to interpret that as what I think that means, I'm like, how is that for you? How does it feel? How intense is it? Where do you experience it? How does it get better? How does it get worse? All these things about learning about someone's inner world, and when we learn to navigate and be with ourselves and with our own nervous system, I often say my words backwards. The urges then stop. I don't ask people to stop doing anything, any behavioral control, because that's what they need, to be okay. But what happens is the more people know themselves and they know that they're not broken, they're not this identity that was created over these years of suffering, then they just usually say to me, oh, I don't really feel that the power of that anymore. It's not there. The intensity of that need is not there anymore. And the one question that I always ask people that tells me about where they are in themselves is like, what do you do that you don't want to do? What do you do against your own will? Because that is what always shows up, based on, if you want, a metaphoric spectrum of how close we are to ourselves,
Say more about what the sentence you just said. What is it that you don't want to do? What is it that you're, because what I got from you is more like, okay, I'm going to go toward myself, right? So as I'm going toward myself, I have to have the ability to have this let's say unconditional regard and love for whatever I found, right? So if I'm having a pain in the jaw, that I'm not going through the pain and saying, I can't stand it. I hate you. I hate my body for giving me this pain, but to even going and being curious, with a curiosity, looking at what is the message of the pain. So you're moving toward and allowing your body to talk to you and share with you, right? So far, I got that. So it's more of the mindfulness, the awareness, and having the containment, like having the ability to contain whatever information shows up, and for us to take that as a valid message that our body says, and then we can look at where it's coming from, and to be able to work through all of that. And part of the work through is just allowing it to bubble up, and for us to experience the experience and gain the information, as you said, intelligence, gain the information that our body, our subconscious, and psyche is offering. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then from there, you're also sensing your needs, right? Your body is having needs. And and then right there, this is where I was asking if you could follow more with that. As I noticed that, at this point, my body needs, or my psyche needs something. And, but on the other hand, my intelligence says that is consequential and it's not working for me. And at that, let's say, crossroad that I show up, then how do you go about healing that or being with it?
What I hear from you, let me know if I got it, is that you're really asking the difference between a trauma response and a natural long desire or need for something. Like, how do I know the difference between my normal need for something and something that's really an escape? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes, and then if there's one element of it, which is just the awareness of it, and then there's another element which is an action oriented after the awareness, and there's a fourth that at that moment I'm making some decisions around the action orientation of, do I do this behavior or not, right? So there's an awareness and then there's an action, and at the action, if there's a decision making to be made. So for example, there's been a lot of times where I come to this place and then my brain says, yes, I still want that sugar, or I still want that thing. And there's a time that I've allowed myself to do that. And then went with the experience of how is it to want it, to have it, to create it, and then the experience of afterward of having it, how it is, or the experience of, okay, I want this. And then I tell myself that I'm not going to have it. And then there's also the experience of holding myself from something that I say that I want to go for, or exchange it with saying, I don't want to have the sugar, but I want to have the peace of mind, and then shift it to having another way of having that peace of mind, let's say, versus having the sugar. That's how I've done work 30 years, but I want to know yours. So I was just sharing, this is how it shows up for me. I want to know how it shows up for you.
Yeah. I mean, like, we're taking the shame away from all experience from a start. It's kind of like, so you can't get it wrong in this process, and for sure, if you act against your better intuition, you will know about it afterwards, and like, quite often for people, once the urge comes, there's no avoiding it. It's an all-encompassing mind and body experience. It's what I call a physical compulsion of the body and a mental obsession of the mind. When that's going on, like, what is it and you think about it this way, like, what is it you're actually doing? Are you even interested in the thing anymore that you want, or do you just want the internal experience of overwhelming urge and mental obsession to stop? Because that's all anybody wants. They want the mental obsession to stop and the urge to end. So we're not actually going towards anything. We're just projecting onto an object, meaning a type of food in this discussion, or anything else. The body and mind is in a state of overwhelm, like the mind is consumed. The body is having a physical response. We just want it to stop, to end, It's like, when that happens, like, nobody that I know is able to avoid that. So I don't expect people to, or ask people not to, I say, you just do what you got to do if that occurs, it's like, that's when it shows up. But the work that we're doing is moving towards ourselves. So there's less of that showing up, like eventually it stops. It's kind of like eventually people get to the point where they go, do you know what? I thought about, let's say sugar, right? I thought about having this cake and I just thought, I don't want that anymore. And it was okay. And it just went away and that was it. And their relationship with a particular object. Now, some people in this experience, some people avoid and take the route of abstinence, say, you know what, that just doesn't work for me because when I eat it, I don't feel good or I want more. Other people don't. I've worked with many people who can drink again normally after having a compulsive habit. And I've worked with many people, me being one of them, that thinks it's not a good idea, like I am abstinent and sober. It's like, I think that that's the best way for me. I don't want to try, I don't want to check it out. It's different for all people through that process. And I don't know the depth of someone's somatic conditioning, their trauma, what they're even revealing to me is the full story in the moment, because sometimes you'll probably know this with all your years of experience that after a while, people reveal stuff. They start to trust you and feel a bit safer in relationship. 3 months into a connection with a client, they disclose something that was really important that they'd never mentioned before. And you think, wow, that brings a new light to this relationship, So, people are on this ongoing journey to themselves and finding relational safety, co-regulation in relationship with you or with me in this case. And in response to that, they're co-regulating, their regulation is changing within themselves. So their relationship is developing with their own nervous system. So they have a deeper capacity to be with themselves and discomfort. It's like it's a constant expansion of people's relational capacity with themselves, their own nervous system, their own experience, their own feelings, developing a dialogue, developing a conversation with themselves, developing a knowing of inner parts, of young parts, of insecure parts, of with parts that withdraw, of parts that freeze and shut down and fawn and so on, all these things. So all that inner relationship is happening and people are knowing of themselves. And this is not linear or binary. There's no steps 1, 2, and 3, or here's how it works, or it happens in this period of time. I can't say that. I really can't, and I make that clear to people. But there's also a spiritual element to this work, an awakening that this is happening in this body, but it's not me. This is not who I am. This is not my identity. I am not addict, or I am not survivor, or victim. I'm not any of these things. Actually, this experience is happening in me, So our relationship with thought, our relationship with the idea of me, the creation of me happens in my own thoughts. I am a concept in my own mind is another part of the work. So that, in a way, that realization that this is not me takes a weight off people, it's like, okay, then this is not me. It's just happening in me, it's kind of like, I don't have to add these post-it notes that stick them on myself and give myself trauma victim and trauma survivor and addict and now I'm healing and so on and so on, more and more labels for the identity. I reduce those labels with people. Is that true? Is that who you really are? Like, are these things really about you, or are they just happening in you? So there's a relationship with experience, meaning the experience of my own mind, the story of myself, that also lightens the load. So just to add a little bit to that, like the words like trauma and nervous system and dysregulation and survivor and victim and addict and all that, like when we break them all down, what we're saying is thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. I'm telling a story about myself. I'm having a sensation. You could say trauma is playing out in my body, or you could say right now there's a sensation happening inside of me that I don't feel too good about, or something like that. So we're taking off the story, the labels, the idea, the common buzzwords, the narratives, and so on, and coming back to what's happening right now.
So we're looking at the process as a transient process, not who I am, but we label it as a transient process that is happening inside of me as I'm experiencing it, regardless, versus this is who I am, and then you label it, and then you hold that kind of it as an identity.
Yeah.
One, get this book, Infinite Recovery. Infinite recovery, and I could even call it as an infinite discovery as you share it.
Yeah.
in a sense, right? And it's an
Yeah.
intelligent way of looking at addiction by Jason Shiers.
Yeah.
Jason, anything we haven't shared that you really want people to know?
No, I think one thing that springs to mind is, and it's quite often this crops up for me, this is a really simplifying process. Me and you have discussed it on, like an internal experience and a clinical kind of level, but like actually, and that can make it sound complicated, but I want to say it's actually really simple. In my book, it talks about simplifying. I think pathology and diagnosis is complicated. When we start talking about brain function, nervous system, stress response, hormones, and so on, the typical tendency of the field is to overcomplicate and make things more complicated to the point where there's, I think, over 500 official talking therapies. And what I want to say is actually it's quite simple, this process. It's not that complicated. It's undoing rather than doing. It's unlearning rather than learning. It's unlearning what's not true. It's undoing what's not true. And it's returning to who you are already. You don't have to become somebody new. We're just uncovering who you are, So that's all I wanted to add.
Where can people find you?
infiniterecoveryproject.com is the website. You can find the book on there, links to Amazon and the work and how it is and who I work with and how that works,
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy developed by Dr. Foojan Zeine is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing Awareness Integration Therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.